The letter arrived on a Tuesday, sealed in crisp ivory paper, smelling faintly of lavender and old money. It was addressed to Caleb Monroe, 24, who stood frozen in his cramped Oakland apartment, the weight of his grandparents' estate. $20 million, suddenly his. But the words that followed, penned in his mother's sharp cursive, sliced deeper than joy. You don't deserve this. Not after what you've done. Caleb's heart thudded as he sank onto the worn couch, the letter trembling in his hands. He'd always known his family's love came with strings. Tight, suffocating ones. But this was betrayal dressed in ink. His grandparents, Evelyn and Harold Monroe, had been his sanctuary, the only ones who saw him, truly saw him, as a black gay man navigating a world that often turned its back. Now they were gone, their sprawling Napa Valley estate left to him and his family. His mother, his uncle, his cousins were circling like vultures, claiming his truth disqualified him from their legacy. He tossed the letter aside and glanced at the photo on his coffee table. Him and Mateo Alvarez, his boyfriend of 2 years, laughing at a street fair in San Francisco's Mission District. Mateo, 25, with his warm brown eyes and infectious grin, was the one constant in Caleb's life, the one who made the chaos bearable. They'd met at a queer poetry slam, where Mateo's words, raw, unapologetic, had left Caleb breathless. Now, as the weight of his inheritance and his family's venom settled in, he needed Mateo more than ever. The doorbell buzzed, and Caleb opened it to find Mateo, his dark hair mussed from the Bay Area wind, carrying a bag of tacos from their favorite taqueria. You look like you've seen a ghost, Mateo said, his smile fading as he caught Caleb's expression. Without a word, Caleb handed him the letter. Mateo's eyes scanned the page, his jaw tightening with each line. They're really coming for you, he whispered, pulling Caleb into a hug. But they don't get to win. That night, over tacos and cheap wine, they pored over the legal documents from the estate lawyer. The will was ironclad. Evelyn and Harold had ensured Caleb was the sole heir, but his family was already contesting it, citing moral failings and digging up old wounds. Caleb's mother, Diane, led the charge, her evangelical fervor fueling her claim that his lifestyle shamed the family name. His uncle, Richard, a slick real estate mogul, had hired a team of lawyers to argue Caleb was unfit, while his cousins whispered lies about his mental stability. The money wasn't just a fortune. It was a battleground. Caleb leaned against Mateo, the warmth of his presence grounding him. I don't care about the money, Caleb said, his voice cracking. I just want what Gran and Pops wanted for me. A chance to live free, to be me. Mateo squeezed his hand. Then we fight. For them. For you. The next morning, they drove to Napa, the rolling vineyards stretching under a hazy sky. The Monroe estate loomed ahead, a grand Victorian with ivy-covered walls and memories in every corner. Caleb hadn't been back since the funeral, and the sight of it, his grandparents' pride, now his, stirred a mix of grief and resolve. Inside, he found a journal in Evelyn's study, her handwriting filling the pages with stories of their love for him, their dreams for his future. You are enough, she'd written. Always. But the peace didn't last. Diane arrived unannounced, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown. This house, this money, it's not yours, she spat, her eyes cold. You've chosen sin over family. Caleb's chest tightened, but Mateo stepped forward, his voice steady. He's your son. How can you hate him for who he loves? Diane's gaze flicked to Mateo, venomous. You're no better, dragging him deeper into this. She stormed out, leaving a threat hanging in the air. She'd see him in court. The courtroom in San Francisco was a sterile cage of polished wood and sharp suits, a stark contrast to the warmth of the Napa estate. Caleb sat beside his lawyer, Sarah Gwynn, a fierce woman in her 30s who'd taken his case pro bono after hearing his story. Across the aisle, Diane and Richard sat with their legal team, their faces unreadable but their intent clear, to strip Caleb of everything. Mateo, in the gallery, caught Caleb's eye, offering a small nod that said, "I'm here." The hearing began with Richard's lawyer, a man with a voice like gravel, painting Caleb as an ungrateful opportunist. "Mr. Monroe has shown disregard for family values," he said, holding up photos of Caleb and Mateo at a pride parade, as if love were a crime. Caleb's stomach churned, but Sarah countered with the will's clarity and Evelyn's journal. Her words read aloud to the court, "Caleb is our heart, our legacy." The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, listened intently, but Caleb knew this was only the beginning. Outside, the media had caught wind of the case, and reporters swarmed. "Caleb, is it true your family's disowning you for being gay?" one shouted. Mateo pulled him through the crowd, shielding him from the cameras. Back at their hotel, Caleb broke down, the weight of public scrutiny and family betrayal crashing over him. "Why do they hate me so much?" he sobbed. Mateo held him, his voice soft but fierce. "They don't hate you. They're scared of what they can't control." Over the next weeks, the battle intensified. Richard's team dug into Caleb's past, twisting old college struggles into evidence of instability. Diane took to local church groups, rallying support with sermons about saving her son. But Caleb and Mateo fought back, gathering allies, friends from the Poetry Slam, a queer support group in Oakland, even a former teacher of Caleb's who testified to his character. Sarah uncovered Richard's shady business dealings, hinting he wanted the estate to cover his debts, not to protect the family name. One night, exhausted, Caleb and Mateo escaped to a quiet beach in Half Moon Bay. The waves crashed softly, and under the stars, Mateo pulled out his guitar, strumming a melody he'd written for Caleb. "This is us," he said, his voice a bomb. "No matter what they take, they can't touch this." Caleb kissed him, the salt of the sea mingling with the warmth of their love, and for a moment, the world felt right. But the next day brought a blow. Diane's team produced a forged document, claiming Evelyn had amended the will before her death, redirecting the estate to the family trust. Caleb's heart sank. His grandparents' wishes, their love, were being erased. Sarah, undeterred, promised to fight the forgery, but the stakes were higher now. "We need proof," she said. "Something undeniable." Caleb and Mateo returned to the Napa estate, searching for answers. In the attic, among dusty trunks and faded photos, they found a locked box with Evelyn's initials. Inside was a videotape, labeled simply "For Caleb." Heart-pounding, Caleb played it on an old VCR. Evelyn's face filled the screen, her voice steady but warm. "If you're watching this, my boy, it's because someone's trying to take what's yours. Don't let them. We chose you because you're true to yourself, and that's worth more than any fortune." Harold appeared, his arm around her, adding, "We love you, son. Fight for it." The tape was a lifeline, but it wasn't enough. Yet, Sarah needed corroborating evidence to authenticate it. Caleb and Mateo spent days combing through estate records, finding letters and notarized documents that supported the original will. Meanwhile, Diane escalated her campaign, leaking stories to tabloids that painted Caleb as a greedy manipulator. The pressure was suffocating, but Mateo kept him grounded, cooking late-night meals and whispering promises of a future together, maybe a small house by the sea, free from all this. One evening, a surprise ally emerged. Caleb's cousin, Lena, a shy 22-year-old who'd been silent through the feud. She showed up at the estate, eyes red from crying. "I don't agree with Mom," she said, glancing at Diane's name. "She's wrong about you." Lena revealed she'd overheard Richard and Diane discussing the forged document, admitting it was a desperate move to control the estate. She'd recorded the conversation on her phone, terrified but determined to help. Armed with the tape, Lena's recording, and the documents, Sarah built a case that turned the tide. In court, the judge's expression shifted as the evidence piled up. Richard's composure cracked, and Diane's righteous facade faltered when Lena took the stand, her voice trembling but clear. "Caleb's my family," she said. "He's always been kind to me, even when I didn't deserve it." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. That night, Caleb and Mateo sat on the estate's porch, the stars bright above the vineyards. "Lena's brave," Mateo said, his hand in Caleb's. "Like you." Caleb smiled, feeling a spark of hope. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time he believed they might win. Not just the money, but the right to be seen, to be loved. The final hearing loomed, a storm cloud over Caleb's life. Sarah presented the video, Lena's recording, and the documents, dismantling the forgery with surgical precision. Richard's lawyer stammered, caught off guard, while Diane sat rigid, her eyes fixed on the floor. The judge ruled the forged document inadmissible, but the family's last card was a personal attack. Diane took the stand, claiming Caleb had abandoned them by choosing his identity over their values. Her words cut deep, but Caleb stood, his voice steady. "I didn't choose who I am. I chose to live honestly. Gran and Pops loved me for it, and I won't let you erase that." The courtroom buzzed, and Mateo's proud smile from the gallery gave Caleb strength. The judge adjourned for deliberation, leaving Caleb and Mateo to wait in a fog of uncertainty. They spent the day in San Francisco's Castro district, wandering rainbow-lined streets, finding solace in the community's vibrancy. At a small cafe, they met an older couple, James and Luis, who'd been together for 40 years. "We fought our own battles," James said, his hand on Luis's. "Love like yours. It's worth everything." Their words lingered, a reminder that Caleb and Mateo's fight was bigger than the money. It was for every queer person told they weren't enough. Back in court, the judge's ruling came. The estate was Caleb's, unequivocally. Diane's face crumpled, and Richard stormed out. But Caleb felt no triumph, only relief, and a pang of grief for the family he'd lost. Lena approached, hesitant. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Caleb hugged her, whispering back, "You're still family." It was a small step, but it mattered. That evening, Caleb and Mateo drove to the cliff where they'd shared countless dreams. The sunset painted the sky in fiery hues, and Caleb felt his grandparents' presence in the breeze. "What now?" he asked, his voice soft. Mateo grinned, pulling out the journal they'd found in Evelyn's study. "We live. We build something real, something ours." The months that followed were a whirlwind. Caleb used part of the inheritance to fund a community center in Oakland, a safe space for queer youth, named after Evelyn and Harold. He and Mateo worked side by side, turning the estate's wealth into something tangible: art programs, counseling, scholarships. The center's opening drew a crowd, including Lena, who volunteered, slowly rebuilding their bond. Diane and Richard faded from Caleb's life, their absence a quiet ache, but he found family in the community he'd built. One spring evening, Caleb and Mateo stood on the center's rooftop, the city lights twinkling below. Caleb proposed, a simple ring in his hand, his voice thick with emotion. "You're my home," he said. Mateo's eyes shimmered as he said yes, and their kiss felt like a promise kept, a victory over every obstacle. The journal, now filled with their own dreams, sat nearby, a testament to their journey. Years later, the center thrived, a beacon of hope. Caleb and Mateo, now married, welcomed a foster child, a teenager named Alex, into their home. They taught him what Evelyn and Harold had taught Caleb: to be enough just as you are. The estate, once a battleground, became a place of healing, its doors open to anyone who needed it. Caleb often thought of his grandparents, their love carrying him through the fight, and he knew they'd be proud. Not of the money, but of the life he'd built with Mateo, a life where love defied all odds. The story wasn't just about the $20 million. It was about Caleb's fight to be seen, to be loved, to be whole. And in the end, he won, not because of the money but because he chose himself and Mateo chose him too. Their love, like the driftwood etched with their truth, stood strong against the tides.